Yeah, well, I'm Jon Alcorn. I'm the current athletic director, dean of students. I'm the newcomer to the school. I've only been there 34 years. Coached a little basketball at the beginning because he made me. And once I convinced him I didn't know anything about that, and I just stuck with soccer and finished up with about 20 years with the girls' varsity soccer team.
And I'm Snyder from Argos High School. I started in 1964 as far as teaching, but I coached a little bit before that at Argos. But I spent probably over 50 years coaching and teaching, between coaching and teaching at Argos. I coached all sports. I had started out with junior high sports and then went into high school, but I coached basketball, track. I coached baseball, soccer, and tennis. I coached 1 year of golf, but
And I think you coached a little bit of volleyball one time.
Oh, I'm sorry. I coached volleyball. I helped out in volleyball 1 year. Yes, I did.
Were any of your soccer teams successful?
What?
Any of your soccer teams successful?
Our soccer teams were, as far as I was concerned, were always successful because of the boys mainly, but we won 3 state championships in the Soccer Association, 1973, 76, and 78.
Wow. I thought it was pretty funny then when I was coaching the varsity girls. I needed a junior high or JV coach, and he volunteered to do the JV girls. He might have regretted that a few times during that, but it was pretty funny. The 3 state champions, he's helped me out.
I enjoyed every year of it.
Yeah.
No, I was not. That was 1963, and we had a coach there by the name of Ralph Powell, and he decided he needed some way to keep his boys, get his boys in shape for basketball, and was talking to CMA coach. From what I understand, they decided to play soccer. They played 3 games that year. From what I know about it, it was a tie ball game at first, then Argos won 1 and CMA won 1. And that more or less started Argos in soccer. They enjoyed it so much that they carried on from there. Well, CMA had the field, but Argos had a track setting up, at that time up by the school, and they more or less set things up there to start with. It's not the same soccer field we have now.
The boys were telling me about practice. A lot of times they'd go out and they'd pick rocks first and get the rocks out of it, and then slowly it got better as they went along.
Yes, but we still, even though we got most of them out, we still played with a few rocks in the field, yes. Yeah. And a few headaches from it too.
Yeah.
Well, in the beginning of it, I would say the first 2 or 3 years, no, there wasn't that many injuries. But as time went on, boys got more involved, worked at it, I would say, a little bit harder, a little bit rougher than what it was. And we ended up with some knee injuries and broken legs and ankle injuries and things like that. In fact, I think it was probably 1969, I think we had 2 knee injuries that put 2 boys in the hospital. Yeah.
They didn't have the arthroscopic surgery like they do today too, either with that. But 64 then, they added, I think, Bethany Christian and a couple others. There was a Divine Heart. Was that it?
Divine Heart, Bethany Christian.
College or something, Donaldson?
Yeah, out by Ancilla College, Divine Heart. They played 2 physical education teams. One was over around Kankakee Valley area.
Teft or Treft?
Teft
or something like that.
Yeah, Teft. And then Wawasee Prep came into the picture, another private school. So it built up to about 6 teams then after that.
And then in '69 they started a conference, so that would have been the first conference in Indiana for soccer at least, and that's been going. That competition's been going ever since with the conference championships.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, we had these people that wanted football, and in fact we had one father that was pushed it a little bit, but it just wouldn't go over because we didn't have the number of kids, we didn't have the money to finance it, and so little by little it went side to sideline, and they realized soccer was the sport to go to.
And I think it worked out pretty well. We went, I think, at least 50 years without a losing record. That first year we were 500 if you call 1-1-1.
Yeah, right.
But I know 50 years, and I know that because my son was on the team. I think they had one of the first losing records when he was in high school. So that's something they really weren't too proud of. But
if you talk about the skill of soccer, and I think when Coach Powell coached and when I coached also, it was a kind of a run and gun type game. We really didn't have the skills they have today. If we were to go up against the skills of today's soccer, there's no comparison, you know. But as far as working hard and the hustle and up and down the field, we probably could keep up with them there. Yeah, we had a soccer coaches association, and we really the key of the whole thing was to build soccer throughout the state. And so we would meet maybe in Kokomo or Indianapolis with teams from Evansville and Indianapolis, Lafayette, and around the northern parts here. We would meet and try to work to build the programs around Indiana. And we come up with the idea of, let's play a north-south sectional in 1973. And so the teams from the north of Indianapolis played a tournament. Bethany Christian, Argos, Westview, the teams up and through here, Prep and of course CMA. Loudemere came into the picture. And then the teams down there from Indianapolis on down would play their sectional. And we decided that the winners of each sectional would play at CMA. CMA at the time probably had the best soccer field in the state. And Evansville Memorial came up as a winner, and we came up a winner here. And we played the championship at CMA. If I remember right, I think it was
that year was New Albany.
Evansville and New Albany had some teams in.
I happen to bring it with me. You're pretty close. 1-0 is what it says.
Oh, 1-0. Okay.
It's the records I've been given.
It was one goal, I remember, and but it was a good game, and it was the starting of a new beginning of soccer, I think, in the state of Indiana. We had 100% support of the people then, and numbers of kids. We always had kids out. We didn't have to worry about not having enough kids, but it just started kind of doubling from there. Everybody wanted to play soccer. We started from there. We started in the junior high, and then when Jon came into the picture, he helped get things started from kindergarten, so to speak.
A little bit, and I think the started a local youth league, and I believe it was like 80 or 81, and I want to say guys like John Vanderbilt from Mr. Trophy and Ted Ummel were a couple of guys that kind of got that thing going. Right. And I don't remember the towns originally, but it was quite a few little towns and starting. And when I came, 85 here, some of the smaller teams were co-ed. I remember having a boys' 3rd and 4th grade team, and the girls were doing cartwheels in the field during the game. Right. But so that's grown to be, got up to probably around, it was over 2,000 kids at one time between all the different towns. And I think now it's about 1,800. Yeah. But so that got the kids starting at 5th kindergarten, and then the parents would always say, well, my kid's a big preschooler, can he play? And so it's kind of eased up, so now we kind of have a preschool program. So I have kids probably 4 or 5, and sometimes the first couple of years all they do is pull worms out of the grass. That's what my son did, but they also having a good time and learn some stuff, and it's very inexpensive, and still run by some volunteers, and gets a lot of kids active from the youngest ages. And I think that helps. The bigger schools obviously have overall better athletes and more of them, but they're specializing a lot more. And I know that at Argos, probably still 60 or 70% of the kids are playing some sports, but most of them are playing 2 or 3. And so that's a good thing really for kids, I think.
When I started coaching, and I picked up things, to be very honest with you, I had to ask the seniors in 1966 about the game. I never saw a game. I never played a game. And I always tell the old joke is I wasn't sure how to spell it. I didn't know, but if there was two C's or one. But anyway, the seniors kind of took over for me. People like Wade Odell, Chuck Lewis, and some of them. And they taught me the game. And I would say that, again, the skill really didn't come in till, probably 10 years later. I mean, as far as really the skill. We played 2 halfbacks, 2 fullbacks, 3 halfbacks, and then 5 on the line. And then we, of course, the goalie. And the fullbacks stayed right there by the goalie. I mean, it was their job to stay right there and protect the goalie, more or less. 2 of the halfbacks stayed midfield, go up to the midfield, and that was it. The center halfback would play the whole field with the line. Well, today, it's a whole different story. They switched everything around, and John can tell you the lineups they have now compared to that.
Yeah. Well, and most schools are playing 4 in the back in some kind of lineup, but those players on the back, when we're on offense, they are supposed to look for gaps and head upfield. And in fact, if you see a team that has all their players staying back at the defense all the time, then that's a poor coach team, and you can about write them off right away. But yeah, definitely the skill level is much higher, which is it's normal. You're going to have that. I will say though that I know when he was coaching with me, he's always telling me, I don't know much about soccer and all this stuff, but he did know about motivating kids, and he learned quite a bit of soccer along the way. I can't say he didn't do that, but he also knew about motivating kids and getting them to work hard, and I think this is a strange moment because this is the first year he's not coaching something. I think even last year we're still coaching JV girls, and I do hear a lot of stories. The boys love telling the stories about soccer practices back in the day. It's probably like those stories that grow a little bit, because I think the last guy told me you guys just run about 50 miles before and after practice. Well, quite that, but it grows.
They'd stretch it, but we'd run 20 miles a day, 10 in the morning and 10 in the afternoon.
Yeah. And they used to, would be stories about on a real foggy day, some of the boys got caught trying to cut corners and stuff, and of course it gets back to them. And they still would cut corners in the fog. They've done that a few times.
Yeah.
But
that was John Hampton. Yeah. Don't forget that.
Busted. Yeah.
But it was. I want to make that clear. It was a walk and run 10 miles, not a solid running 10 miles.
Yeah. And that's not how the boys tell it now, of course. But that's you can tell they really enjoyed the challenge of it, and we're proud of being part of that. And those stories that maybe grow a little bit over the years are part of the fun of that. But the kids did play hard, and I'm not from Argos, but when I was in high school, I did know quite a few boys from Argos through some church events that I knew some kids, and they were always excited about soccer, and I like soccer, but my school didn't have a team, and so it kind of made a difference. But there's no doubt that soccer was, by the 70s, it was well locked into the psyche of everybody, and when you have, even in our rec league, we had parents who would try to bring their kids to Argos's rec league because they knew the Argos coaches tended to be the ones who had played and knew more, where a lot of the other towns were just lucky to find a parent who's willing to do it. And so that kind of felt like they got a little better training. And I thought it was kind of funny too how many of the other schools ended up having Argos soccer coaches. I was thinking you had the Malone guy. Malone had pretty good athlete at Argos, ended up helping out starting Bremen's. Of course, Kurt Feast at Plymouth was one, and I'm sure there's more.
Jeff Odell at Argos and
Plymouth for a while.
Yeah.
And Kelsey Hollabaugh did some stuff. Jad Kinney coached a little bit here and there, and so at one time, and Northwood still has an Argos coach, and Phil Hummel.
Yeah.
And Ted Renninger over at
Northridge.
He's retired. He's just watching his little girls grow up right now. But his grandpa was the first. I guess his dad was the first goalie for Argos, Charlie Renninger. He was a senior that first year. I'm pretty proud of that. He was the first goalie. I didn't know a thing about soccer, but I could stand back there between the goals. And then when you built into the into the 70s, and you'd won a couple state championships, and it was the thing to do. And there's still a lot of other local schools. Probably just us, the CMA at that time, were the only ones in the county that had a soccer team, I would guess.
Yeah, I think so. Yes.
But then you had the 70s was kind of like the golden age. You had an incredible class come through, and athletes, not just soccer, but also basketball, like baseball, track, and probably everything they did. A lot of those kids, I saw 4 different sports on their leather jackets, looking at the old pictures.
Yeah, it was the same boys more or less, with a few added here and there that accomplished all that.
And I would probably say that leads into I don't know, that 70 team of athletes probably had to be one of the most successful athletic classes ever. Not only, well, certainly for Argos, but maybe even the county. And 78, what was their record in soccer that fall? Was it that the 18-0 team?
18-0, yes.
It beat Carmel 5-2 in the championship game. Now, was that played in Annapolis, or was that played
That was played in Indianapolis.
And
Carmel jumped out on us 2-0, and we got fired up after that, and ended up beating 5-2.
Yeah.
I think the score was. Yeah.
And so then that same group of boys went to the state finals then, and as far as I hear, at 79 it would be a small school since Milan to get to state finals in single class basketball. And I wasn't from Argos. I actually went to Warsaw, which is not a good thing, because one of my first experience watching Argos basketball was I was up at Northside Gym as a junior, I think, was 1980, when Argos had a really good team again, and they lost to Warsaw by a point in the regional. Kid missed 2 free throws, he never misses. And I was up there rooting against the Dragons at that time. I'd never, and I knew them as being a really good basketball. I didn't know as much about their soccer stuff, but to look back now, I probably would have made myself root for Argos if I knew the stories that they would tell us about those things. Well, I know Phil always talked about that might be a better team than the year before in some ways.
Yes, in many ways, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But
about the same bunch of kids, really.
But they still have that school record, 76 consecutive regular season games. And what year did that start? That was
It started in 1978, ended in 1982.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so that's still a state record. I don't see that record being broken anytime real soon, if ever. And that's kind of a neat thing. They call it Spirit 76 is kind of how they characterize that. But it just, to me, I was impressed looking back at it to see that same class of kids wins state champion of soccer, and then is in the Final Four in basketball, and set that record and won 4 sectionals in basketball in a row. It's one class.
Yes.
And I've watched some of the kids of those guys have come through already, and a lot of them were pretty good athletes too. But just to have that bunch of kids at one time, that was outstanding. And look at the whole yearbooks; they were pretty good in baseball and track too.
They went to the final sectional game in baseball, and was defeated there, I think by Plymouth, if I'm not mistaken. But I know they about won the sectional in baseball that year too. Came awful close.
Yeah.
Well, throwing out names though, you always leave that one person out. But if you want to talk about some of the boys, Mark Malone, Dave Calhoun, Don and Bill Odell, Doug Jennings, boys like that were the Sheets, Mike Sheets, which is a Plymouth person now, of course. As far as, I think he was a sophomore, junior at the time. But that was some of the key players. Chuck Evans was on the team, I remember, and Dave Tuttle, Montgomery, Mark Montgomery. Anyway, one of the Montgomery boys. They were all solid athletes in everything. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of those have had their kids already come through now, And I know Don's daughter was pretty big scorer for Argos in soccer and basketball, and played college basketball, and could have played college soccer. I know several Odells, other Odells went through there.
Doug's daughter was Miss Basketball.
Yeah, I think she's playing.
She played out Logansport.
She's back in the States. She went to Iowa, and I think she's back. Maybe she's a Butler.
She's a Butler now.
Butler, yeah.
Playing for Butler. But Don Odell's daughter, Amberly, there's a lot of their kids become athletes, follow right along with them, yeah. By the way, that was Tim Montgomery. It just came to me.
Well, I think
But anyway,
you have the really good athletes too, and you got to have some of those to be successful. But the other thing I always liked as a coach at Argos is that it seemed like you get everybody to play, and it's easier in soccer when you're playing 11 or so. But I thought it was pretty cool to see kids that at most places would have been cut as freshmen, and at Argos they get to keep playing, and some of them really ended up contributing in a lot of different ways when they were seniors. And I think that's kind of nice to take that average kid. I know my son was one of the smallest kids as a freshman, and if he'd been going to a big school, not having to reach puberty or anything, and he might have been cut from some of those teams, and ended up having a successful and good time at Argos and playing college, and we just had a couple boys down at the Christian College National Tournament, Damon Binkley and Josiah Osborne, and playing soccer, and both of those guys went over to Grace College in Winona Lake and had a really good, successful year. And there really isn't a lot of kids that go from high school and play college sports, but
we've had boys and girls both come out and play college soccer. In fact, Bethel's first championship, we had 5 Argos boys on that team.
Yeah. There's quite a few of them that went to Bethel.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
But they're scattered around. We've had them play for Ball State and St. Francis, different places. We have boys down at IUPUI, Indiana. University of Indiana playing,
and
Goshen.
Bailey came over to IPFW, and really, when you look at we have records that keep track of what colleges the kids went and played at, and even though it's a small percentage of kids that go to play college sports, there's a lot more soccer players from Argos that have played than when you go to talk to some of the other schools, even though they're bigger. Right. And so that's kind of another fun thing about that.
Well, I think probably part of it is the kids growing up with it, here lately especially. We have kids, like we said before, that start kindergarten and they get it in the blood, so to speak, and they really enjoy it. More kids can play. They realize they have a better chance of making that team, and I think the parents like the idea of their kids being in a sport at a young age, and at the beginning, I think, is from, like I say, 5 years old on up. And so it's just, and the coaches, we have a lot of good coaches at Argos. In fact, John probably is one of them that first started out with the skill part of things. We've had coaches to follow. Todd Vanderwill is our boys coach, which does a tremendous job in coaching skills to the kids, the passing part and so on and so forth. Joey Stone on the girls' side.
Both Argos grads now.
Yeah, and Andy Stone got involved in that, but John probably started the skill part of things, so to speak. But I think that's the reason more kids can be more successful in soccer than they can basketball or other sports.
I think another thing that goes with that too is Argos soccer is not second fiddle to football or something else.
Right.
And most of the other schools in the county have soccer now, but soccer's still for most of them second, third tier, and so it is the emphasis. So that kind of develops a little bit of pride, and I think there's a little bit of, as I moved to Argos in '85, I think there's a little bit of self-pushing pride. When I came to Argos, there was a lot of pride still. The '79 team was just within 6 years of being gone, and still had a lot of success and good teams. And so that was still pushing basketball, and soccer was still kind of like almost like a unique thing. Plus, this is what we do, and it kind of builds that you expect to play. And I know, we were playing last time when the soccer was one single class, and we won the sectional. And don't get me wrong, the multi-class stuff has been good to Argos since we've won. The boys have won 8 sectional straight since that started, and the girls have won 5 of them. But there's something about the single class soccer before where the last time the girls won the regional, we went to or won the sectional, went to the regional. We were playing Penn, and there was something about having a team that's 12, 13 times your enrollment, and it was kind of funny because they had 8 coaches and 8 senior captains. Everything about them was just so much bigger than us, and we ended up scoring first, and then lost 2-1. But there's just a lot of pride about being the small school. That underdog theme, I sense that in Argos a lot. And even when I first came here to Argos, they kept telling me how we got good grades, and the story was that if you'd walk around Argos and ask kids what his grades are, and he'd tell you, and you say, what would they be if it was at X school, and name somebody, and they'd always say their grades would be higher someplace else. Whether it's true or not, I don't know, but there was a culture of we need to be pushed harder. I know as a teacher, I don't remember a parent coming to me and complaining because their kid's grade was too low. I'm sure it happens, but there was just an expectation. So I think that's part of the culture, and it's part soccer, it's part, I think, just small town. Our school is a small town, but there's only one town. Other smaller schools are consolidations, and since there's only one town, it really keeps the school the focus of the community. Even small places like Culver, they've got Culver and Monterey and other places besides just one. And so that's part of the culture. It's pushing them, and everybody does it, and it's just a good expectation.
Into basketball, and we don't want to leave out the girls, of course, as far as that goes. But of course, Argos. Now, this going into this historical museum and stuff, the Argos people very seldom know the history of Argos. It was more or less taught to me by Mr. Hess, is what had happened and how it happened and things like this. And of course, it goes clear back to 1910. And a lot of people don't realize, but we had girls basketball like in 1914, back in through those years too. But boys basketball started at Argos in 1910, and it started upstairs of a building in Argos called the Opera House. It was just a big open building, so to speak. And then, of course, then later on, and I can't give you the exact date, but it was somewhere around 1915. Well, before that, they did move it to the 3rd floor of the old Argos High School. And they played in what they called a chicken coop, because they had put chicken wire up because the kids wouldn't fall off of the floor, more or less, onto the steps. But anyway, and then it switched over to our old high school. It was new then, of course, but the old one. Anyway, what I wanted to say was that teams weren't the best coming up through the years. I mean, it was a lot of losing seasons, many losing seasons. But I can remember reading, and Mr. Hess tell me about a team in 1920 won 20 games and only lost 5. As far as the history of basketball, people remembering during the 20s and 30s, that would have been the year.
I know the museum has a picture here somewhere we gave them of girls basketball from either 1919 or 1929.
1929.
And they were like undefeated team of some kind.
Well, they were 1929. They were undefeated until they run across Wabash. Wabash hadn't lost a game. They didn't have any tournaments then, but Wabash girls did not lose a game. Argos girls did not lose a regular scheduled game, so they decided to get together and play. Well, the outcome was Argos getting beat twice and fairly bad by the Wabash girls basketball. But that was the pride of Argos and girls basketball at that time. But the basketball program, and through the 30s, mid-30s, they had some winning seasons. And then we had a rough 40s into the 50s, and we had a Plymouth man by the name of Bob Heilman, Coach Heilman, came to Argos in about 1950, probably 49, 50, somewhere along in there. And our program in basketball really started there and started going up. He probably, if he had a losing season, it might have only been one. You know, he won the Marshall County tournament in 1951. The first one we had won. You know, in fact, back in 1914, we won one of our runners won a track state championship, and we really hadn't accomplished, you know, a lot throughout those years. We had some good winning seasons in baseball and some in softball and things like that with the guys. But Coach Heilman really started us on the right track, so to speak, and it kind of went from there. And we had other coaches with winning seasons, and but the real, as far as boys basketball, and we'll talk about girls basketball later, but as far as boys basketball, and the only reason I want to take a little credit for this is because I was the head coach at the time and Phil Waybright was my assistant. And I realized he knew more about basketball and could coach it better than I could. And plus I had a lot of nephews coming up. So there was different excuses, you know, but I decided to get out and hand the reins over to Phil. And I knew he'd be successful, but to be very honest with you, I didn't think he'd be as successful as what we were, you know. I mean, I knew we'd have winning seasons, but I really never at the time was thinking state Final Four. And Phil Waybright came from New Paris, Indiana. He played basketball at Manchester. He came in there after I did. And then he came to, as a Manchester graduate, I'd go back and watch him play at Manchester in basketball. I played over there. And then Mr. Hess came in one day and he said, we have a young man applying for a job at Argos. And he told me who it was, and just watching him play, I could tell he's just an all-around tremendous guy. Anyway, back to the basketball. He picked us up from there, and as everybody knows, we went to the Final Four, and 76 winning.
What was his first year coaching?
1975, 4-5 would have been his first year, yeah. And if I'm not mistaken, he had a winning season the first year. In fact, all of, I think he might have coached for about 12, 13 years, and he might have had one, maybe two losing seasons, but that's about all.
He was still coaching when I came, so maybe his last one was maybe about 86 or 87.
86, I think, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I had an interesting connection because I taught with Phil then as a new teacher coming in, but he actually went to New Paris High School. I actually played with my father-in-law. My father-in-law's 3 years older than him, and he's a cousin on my wife's side. So it's an interesting connection there. And he always, a couple of things I got from Phil. One of them is grew up milking cows and decided that is not what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And went to college to be a teacher. And then he also thought, you know, when you're coaching a sport, especially basketball, you should only 10 years about the longest you really want to be at one spot, because you just, you know, you've got to make hard decisions about who plays and who doesn't play. But certainly, there's no doubt he was as successful as you could have asked for in a career.
Yeah. He was a good one, yeah. And again, he was fair with the kids, you know, played a lot of them. I was athletic director at the time.
Okay.
In fact, when I got out of coaching, I went into athletic director. And yes, I was what you call, we didn't have a cheerleading sponsor then. And so we borrowed vans from different people, and I drove the cheerleaders to the games, and my wife and I, and we went to the Final Four, yes. Of course, I wouldn't have missed that. But, no, I'd been to them before, right. In fact, during the 60s and 70s, at Argos especially, and I know other schools were the same way, we would take our kids, the whole team, you know, and go to the state championship games with our basketball teams. And athletic department would buy them tickets and get a bus and or get parents to drive, and we'd take them to the game. So I've been to many of them before, and enjoyed them, you know. But I never realized the enthusiasm, you know, until we went down there with our boys for the first time. Yeah. And the boys were, I would say, nervous to start with, and didn't get off to the best start. But then we started playing basketball. But Muncie, you know, Marion, Muncie, I probably could name a few of them out of Indianapolis, Christmas Addicts. They were used to, a lot of these teams were used to being there, you know. And it was a big thing to Argos. And when the kids walked into the old gym, you know.
Market Square.
Well, Market Square, yeah.
By then.
But we spent most of our games watching at Hinkle Fieldhouse, yeah, State Farm. But you could see the kids when they walked in there, you know, it was like, you know, it was a whole different world for them. So it's to be expected to be nervous and not to get off to the best start.
Well,
but we played well.
Yeah, and it was, and of course, I wasn't at Argos at that time. I was in high school, but my high school, Warsaw, went to a state finals and lost in '81, my senior year, and so I got to experience a little taste of that. But just over the last 10 years and being AD, the last 7 especially, the different guys will ask me about Argos during that time, and I have to share what I've learned and stuff. But they'll talk about all kinds of things, and they'll talk about the team in '78 and the regional loss and that kind of thing, and then the '79 team, and then this one guy, I talking to him, I don't even know where it was, ran into him the other day, and he was just naming off all the great players that Argos beat that year, and was talking to a referee, and he happened to be from Argos, this referee, and he said, I'd go referee places, and people would say, no, is Argos really that good? And you know, because by that time they'd had 2 or 3 undefeated seasons, regular season. But I know when I was in high school, late '70s especially, the team to beat was Marion Giants. Not only were they're a lot bigger school then than they are now. They definitely have gone down size-wise, but plus the name Giants. So many times the game people in Argos would tell me about is the semi-state game against the Marion Giants, and you thought little Argos and Marion Giants, so it's a great setup.
That was the biggest game on the way up. Yes.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And tell them about how that game went. Give them the rundown.
Played Fort Wayne Harding and pulled out a fast one there at the end. Long pass, lay up. Mark Malone, Bill Odell connected there and stuff on that one to pull that out. Marion, everybody I think in the gymnasium and probably some Argos people thought Marion, which they're used to, you know.
They've been state champs a couple years ago.
Yeah. And it was their game. But the boys, and I think that's one game where the boys went in really not afraid. You know, they were ready to go from the start. And back and forth, of course, good ball game from beginning to end.
Do you know when basketball for girls stopped being played?
Yeah, it was in the 30s. Yeah, the program after the 20s and in the 30s, a lot of the girls' programs were cut out. The girls' program was cut out. And I have no idea why or anything, except maybe there was no interest or other schools were dropping it. I'm not sure. But after the 1929 team, they started Argos more or less, and I can't tell you what year, but a program called GAA, Girls Athletic Association. And that was more or less like an intramural program. The girls would meet once a week, and they would play basketball or volleyball or some type of sport with physical education teacher. And that would be after school, sometimes right after school, sometimes at nights. And then as time went on, of course, and I'm sure, I don't know exactly why, but I'm sure part of it was pressure from parents, you know. It's time to start girls basketball. Other schools have started it little by little. So in the mid-1970s, we started a girls program in basketball at Argos. In the beginning, Carol Arnett had coached that, a physical education teacher at Argos. And then in 1977-8 season, I took over as far as coaching. And I want to say this in a way that it's not because I didn't want to, but I did this because nobody wanted to coach. We couldn't get a coach. And so I said, well, I'll take the job to keep the program going. And so I coached a couple years there with some teams, and we had some good athletes. In fact, I had a girl on the team by the name of Roberta Thompson, which is still our leading high point scorer for one game. She scored 48 points in one game. She had a sister named Sally that was our leading rebounder. She still holds some records at Argos in rebounding and stuff. But I don't want to start naming off names, but we had many girls that helped get the program rolling. And then as we found female teachers that come in that wanted to coach, you know, of course I was more than willing to step down and let them take over, and we started more or less building from there. But the key probably to really start where we started teaching the girls good fundamentals in good basketball, as and I'm the name will come to me later, but we had a young girl from Grovertown,
Julie Awald.
Julie Awald. I know as well as I know my own name, but when I started talking, I forgot. Julie came into our program and really started teaching fundamentals. And I think that's where we really, you know, got started on things. And of course, Julie found a different job and had to move for, well, getting married and stuff, you know. And we lost Julie to Frankfort, Indiana. But anyway, then a young lady, which was a top-notch player in Indiana, named Shelley Newell.
Played Rochester.
Played for Rochester, and one of the All-Star, Indiana All-Star players.
Hall of Fame player too.
Yeah.
Eventually.
Right. Came into our program, and then basketball really went up from there.
One of the things, I have 3 daughters, and I had some daughters that are getting close to basketball age around that time, but I remember we had that Shanna Zolman kid from Wawasee that ended up playing at Tennessee and was Miss Basketball and all that stuff. And I remember a couple of our girls talking about guarding her, and the one girl said, yeah, I guarded her in junior high, and the other girl looked at her and said, well, we both guarded her. But at that time, there was a time in there where the girls started playing in junior high, and somewhere, I don't know if it was you or somebody, started letting the girls start at 5th and 6th grade. And that was about the time too when Shelley Newell came in. I don't know if she was part of that, but I know my kids could play 5th and 6th grade, so the girls, that gave them a little more experience. And
right.
And
yeah, Shelley more or less started working our programs down into the lower elementary and so forth. And again, that got more girls involved year by year. And then of course, needless to say, Shelley took them to the semi-state. Final, we called it wasn't a class thing then, we called it the Final Four, really, is what it was.
Yeah.
And that was played at Plymouth. 2006, I think it was. Yeah, 2006. And then after that, Shelley stayed with it for a while, and then and our girls had a fairly decent program. Not always a winning season, but fairly decent program. And then and John can tell you what year, but Coach Teal from Mentone, Tippecanoe Valley area, came into our program.
He did Argos. It was at Argos, I think 6 seasons, six or 7 seasons, 6 seasons maybe. And so, yeah, he obviously experienced guy. And the nice thing about Shelley was that she was there a long time. Because I remember when I first came to Argos, there was about every 2 years was a new girls basketball coach.
Yes.
And so Shelley gave that steadiness. And then Gary Teal was kind of a find because we had been fortunate to have Shelley for a long time and not have to think about finding a coach. And there's just not a lot of people out there wanting to coach basketball. Even now, when I go to hire a coach, if it's boys basketball, I get plenty of apps. But other sports, as far as serious people who really want to coach it, there's not that many. And Teal had been at Mentone and retired from teaching and had coached basketball and been successful there. And so it was nice to come in, a guy who knew how to run all the details of the program, all the logistics and everything. That's a lot of things that people don't realize.
And and I coached under both of them. I was a JV coach to both of them, and I can tell you they both really knew their basketball and taught me things also. But Coach Teal, although coaching a maybe sometimes different philosophy, and of course in coaching, according to who's playing for you, sometimes you have to change your philosophy and things such that, according to the kids. But in the same manner, they both knew their fundamentals, and they both taught and coached fundamentals, and that's what made both Coach Newell and Teal successful. And Coach Teal, then of course in
2015-16
season, but 2016 took a state final game against Jacksonville, and of course was defeated. But again, it was another, in some ways, kind of a shocking situation to kids. Not taking anything away from the 2006 Final Four, but it was played in Plymouth, and then you walk in
the Pacers
arena, and it's a whole different story. And I think it took us, the girls, a while to...
Took about a quarter.
Yeah, it took about a quarter to really get started.
Their team had been there before, and that makes a difference. But
yeah, but it was exciting, and as or more so even than the Final Four. But they both were great. But again, a lot of the credit goes to the kids, and also, of course, the two coaches. And we, our girls, some of them that followed up this line and was on that are finishing up here, and our girls are still going to stay successful. As far as I can, of course, I picked it up through the grapevine, but what I understand, and I think the man's name was Wickheiser was on the team. In fact, he's one of them was telling about it. That's where I got that name. And we have a trophy there at Argos. But he had won, at that time in track, it was 220, not the 200, it was the 220 yard dash, and he was the championship on that, yes. That was the first big track thing that happened at Argos. Of course, Argos track team in 1955 won the county, I think it was 1955, won the county championship in track, yeah. And always had fairly decent track programs at Argos.
Another feature of the track program seemed to be, the stories I heard was they'd be running a track meet, have to get back in time to play a baseball game or
yeah, kids
hit the golf course.
Did both, right. They played two sports in one season sometimes, yeah. That made it tough.
One of my first years, I remembered, one of my first couple of years at Argos, we had a kid, I think it was Coach Stone, Joey Stone, I think he played baseball, track, and golf. It seemed like he did 3 things. I guess he didn't like to practice much, just go from meet to meet. I can see him doing that.
Some kids had to.
And we don't have track or golf right now, but even without the track team, we did have Rich Warren was a state finalist in high jump, or excuse me, high jump, yeah.
High jump.
And he and his dad, they had their own equipment or used the school's equipment, and he was the Argos track team that year.
He was the only one.
Went state finals without a.
We had the same thing in girls golf as far as we had one girl played girls golf. That was our golf team. Yeah.
What was it?
Oh, in soccer?
Yeah.
CMA. Yeah. It started out Argos and CMA, and it's continued to today. That is a rivalry, so to speak. You know, we have some others, of course, but CMA, I think it's always the big talk. When you play boys or girls, either one, when we play CMA or CGA, that's the ones they really get excited about. You know, we've kind of at times dominated, so to speak. You know, some teams, but I don't think CMA, nothing like we did some of the other teams.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, CMA's always been a good team, and
Yeah.
I think we've played them real close to 100 times. And this records are missing a little bit, but Argos has got 51 wins, 34 losses, and 10 ties with CMA.
Yeah.
And but it's always a good game, and it's always competitive. And Bethany's had some good teams in there too along the way.
Oh yeah, Bethany Christian was always Westview,
Yeah.
all of them at one time or another. You know.
I tell you what, as far as being someone who's not from Argos and coming in, I remembered with the soccer stuff, one year had several coaches just really pointing the other way because a lot of they would say, well, you're the team we circle every year. So in soccer, Argos boys and girls even, but especially the boys, were the team to beat, and so we played a lot of different schools that we had a big rivalry with. I think with the boys, soccer is probably Bethany Christian and Culver Military over the years with the boys most often, and the same probably with girls. But it was really Argos was the game that the other soccer teams. They're the soccer school, so that's the one we circle. And I had a coach explain that to me one year. He says, "Oh, look at this." And then even, of course, Plymouth, you have the whole, you know, when I went to Warsaw High School, and that's the big county school, so in this Marshall County, it's Plymouth's the big county school, and the schools always like to have
Plymouth's
that
an important
rivalry.
one to us also, because they're much larger.
And we don't play them in a lot of things, and so that's a big thing. I can pretty much tell you what my gross record against Plymouth was. I got that pretty much down, and that's I think a source of pride in this, and that's part of that whole small school versus big school mentality that a lot of schools have, but I know Argos has particularly.
Right.
And as far as basketball goes right now, it's probably the Culver game with the belt. We have a belt that's been passed around since 73 or 4, something like
73, I think.
And so we've been passing this bell back and forth, and that's always a big game. You want to see a
The
game
bell
where,
game's big game to
you
us.
know,
Right.
the closest thing to a throwback of basketball is probably the bell game, where sometimes both schools will have a fan bus, and they'll have big student sections at the other game, and it's always a big one. So that's another one. I think definitely one of the basketball games that I remember as just a teacher at Argos, and we had the 79 team, the Final Four team, back for an anniversary. I remember what anniversary it was, and that night was one of the last times we actually played Plymouth for a regular season game. And I remembered we were down by 16 at one time. We had this little feisty little guy by the name of Chris Kessler. I don't know if he ever got more than 5'10", 5'8". He wasn't a very big kid, but he was getting in everybody's faces and telling them we are not going to. And he was not normally a scorer, low guard, but he helped them come back, and they actually won on a tip-in that night, and to beat Plymouth that game. And I remembered it was just, for me as an outsider still learning the Argos lore, I thought it was pretty cool because it's the game I always heard about when I moved here was the tip-in win over Marion that put them into the state final. So to have the team come back and being honored on an anniversary, and then have the kids beat Plymouth on a tip-in after being way behind was really cool. And I think a part of it, you mentioned the quality of the kids, and kids on that team. One of them was the Warren kid who ended up going to state finals in high jump all by himself, and the Kessler kid who went down. I think it was played soccer at DePaul. But then the thing I liked most about him, he was the first in med school. He was the first #1 student in med school that first year. And so just a bunch of kids that were really driven, and they epitomized the Argos expectation of, yeah, you're a small school, so you better go out there and work hard in the classroom, work hard in the field, and make your school proud. And I just thought that was just quite a game I remember. And we've got an anniversary coming up January 4th with bringing the 719 back again. So hopefully the team will respond and give us a good game that one too.
Oh yeah. Probably on the girls' part in basketball, probably Oregon Davis, because they're always good. They're a good team, well coached, and that is a team that we want to beat every year.
Yeah.
Well, coaching ours, probably one of the main thing is the kids. Like every other school, you have your problems, but 99% of the time, we don't with the kids. And I think that's what, and I can go back to the way teachers treated me, and got me going to doing the things that I did through life, and that was my main concern is the kids, and their response is tremendous to you. I've always said I've never had a bad kid in school. Never. Yeah, we had some ornery ones, but I never had a bad kid in school. And every time I think of memories, automatically it doesn't go to an individual or to an individual sport. It goes to kids in general. They've just been tremendous at Argos through my years. I know times change and different things happen, but I never had a bad student or a bad athlete. Just you could even follow families, and I coached 3 generations, and I can see some changes in this grandchild compared to their grandfather that I coached, but in general, it's about the same, There's a few little things here that's not the same, but most of it is. You can tell that the grandparents, the parents, they send that on to their kids, and I couldn't pick out. To be very honest with you, I couldn't pick out any generation better than the other one. Yeah. I know people will argue with me about that, but that's my feeling.
Well, he has told me many times that the 50s was the best time to go to high school, and culture-wise in our whole country, and it's hard to argue with that.
Yeah.
But
I played under Coach Heilman, so I know.
Whose daughter came, Judy Delp, and was our guidance counselor for many years.
Yeah.
A good friend to a lot of us. Yeah. And I do think what you're talking about as an outsider from not going to Argos, every place I went was smaller. My high school was bigger than my college. My college is Argos is the smallest place I've been, and this would have been a kind of school that I would have wanted to go to. I was not a very good athlete, but I could have played everything. I would have sat the bench and had a good time. But a lot of good stuff, and there's a good culture about it that takes, your top of the notch academic kids are going to be successful anywhere they go. But to take your average kids, I think the average kid gets pushed harder at Argos than other places. And I remembered as a teacher, we had another school came in and we were doing some collaboration and sharing ideas by department. And this math teacher from another area school, which will remain nameless, he just said, as watching Argos kids, he said, there's just expectations at Argos that are different than at my school and other places. And that whether it's athletics, it's academics, There's just a push there. And again, you know, some of that is how true and measurable that really is, and how it changes is probably debatable. But that is part of the culture at Argos from when I came there. Oh, this is a hard school. This is a hard school, and I'm like, really? What's so hard about it? And but again, just the average kid, from the fact that one of my favorite stats is that I think it was 2 years ago, 70% of all the girls in school played a high school sport, and most of them were playing too. And so that idea of taking an average kid and getting to experience all that stuff, and most of those kids that were in 2 or 3 sports, they were also in the play, and so, or in music, and so it really is kind of that part is a cultural throwback you want, where you want to work hard, push them hard, but you want to get to do lots of things. And we hear a lot today about people and parents being pressured to just specialize in one thing, and then that dream doesn't come true. They're not a professional, and so I think that's a good part of it. And I think that's another reason why about 10% of our student body now is from outside. People want to send their kids back to enjoy that experience, and so something we're proud of and want to try to keep going.